Hey, thanks for checking out Nuts and Bolts with Tone. Today we're going to talk about a 6-liter Powerstroke. I am going to show you a 6-liter Powerstroke that will not start, and I'm going to show you what you want to look for if you have one of these. Let's get a look at it. So we got this 06 6-liter with 139,000 miles. All right, this thing came to me because somebody had cut the low pressure fuel line and wired in an aftermarket fuel pump. And I'll show you that. But here is what you want to look at if you have a 6-liter Powerstroke that will not start. Now this is an 06. So I've already been cranking on this thing, so I'm going to show you in the data here what you want to look for. And you can see this with a scan tool. So we're going to scroll on down. All right, so we have RPMs. We don't care about any of that stuff. Oil temperature doesn't matter. We're going to keep on going. All right, so there we go. Fuel pump is at 100%, all right? So I still have to check the fuel pressure, but I know there's fuel pressure. I know there's fuel because I had a fuel leak from the pump that they put in. Well, so what you're looking at is you're looking at battery voltage here. You need to see battery voltage there, all right? And then you're looking for 48 volts right here on the 6.0 V-Power. Then you're looking for 6.0 sync, and 6.0 sync is right there. And I have 6.0 sync. You can see how it has sync and not, and sync and not right here. That's the different times I was cranking it. So I had 6.0 sync when I was cranking it. And then here you're also looking for battery voltage there as well. All right, so now let's scroll to the next screen. All right, so pulse width doesn't matter, intake air doesn't matter. Okay, so none of those PIDs matter. All right, so now we're getting to the good stuff here. Okay, so injection control pressure desired. Okay, this is in PSI. Okay, it's asking for 1,531. This thing will start with 500 pounds. So you can see how it's going 0. It's built. Every single time it's wanting to see 1,531. Then here, now this is what's actually really happening. All right. So, and I'll explain how this system works and why this is important. But you can see here how I'm not building any more than 359 pounds, 0.1 pounds of high pressure oil. And remember, I said it needs 500 pounds to start. Every time I try to start it, you can see it goes up, makes it up to about 350-ish, and then back off every time I turn the key off. So these are all my different times of starting it. Now remember, if you have one of these things, don't let it start. Don't let it crank for more than 10 seconds, or you're going to have a melted starter. We actually get that quite often. I just actually did a 6-liter that came in with the melted starter because they tried to start it, and they obviously were cranking on it more than 10 times. Okay, so you can also see how, so this is your ICP voltage. All right, so this one's not going to matter on this one here. So now we're going to go down. And what we want to look at is, we want to look at this. Okay, so now your injection pressure regulator. This is your IPR. This closes to let the oil pressure build if it's not building enough oil pressure. Now this thing operates at 15 to 85%. It won't go lower than 15, won't go higher than 85. At 85, that's completely closed as much as it can close. And that wants to see maximum oil pressure. So if you're ever cranking a 6-liter diesel and this goes to 85, you have a problem. It should not go to 85 when cranking. But now, so you can see how this PID is the injection pressure regulator. And this PID is what's actually happening right there. So we're going to compare these two PIDs, and you're going to look and see that right here, we're building 85%. And if you look up here, it's trying to build oil pressure. So 15% down here, 85%. 15 is every time I try to start it. And you can see every time I had 350 pounds of oil pressure, I had 85%. Now, it's possible that I have a bad IPR and it's not closing the oil completely, and that's not allowing that to build. And that's what I have to test for. So that is what you want to look at right there. Now, yes, okay, do I need to hook up a fuel gauge and see if I have fuel? Yes, I do. However, if this isn't hitting 500 PSI, then I already know I have a high pressure oil problem. And the next step is to air check the system for a leak. And I'm going to show you how to do that. All right, so here we go. Here's the 6 liter. So this is what we're going to do. So that sensor that's right there, this guy right here, we're going to disconnect that. That's the ICP. That is the injection control pressure sensor. We're going to disconnect that, and we're going to take the ICP sensor out so we can put an adapter in there, so that way we can air check this oil system to see why it won't build 500 pounds. So what you have to do is you have to find an adapter. They sell a test kit with 2 fittings, and one of them is this one here. So you just put this in a hose and then run it up here for your air hose. And we're going to screw that in there, and we're just going to put shop air to this thing. And let's see how that's going to work. All right. So here we go. There's the ICP. All right. So we got that out. We're going to take this end right here, and we're going to screw that right into there. So my hose clamp was hitting the glow plug module connector. So you just screw this in hand tight. Okay, now what I like to do is I put a pressure regulator on there just to ease up on the pressure when I get done, so it's not like a giant burst of 120 pounds of air. So we're just going to put shop air right to this thing here. Actually, let me get the scan tool, because what you're supposed to do is you're supposed to close the IPR valve. So it usually takes a minute to push all the oil out. So what we're listening for is we're listening for a whole bunch of air. Okay, so air checking this thing. You can only hear air if you listen to it with a hose in the oil fill cap. So what I did was, we're listening to it here, and you can hear a little bit of gurgling in the crankcase, which is normal. But then when I close the IPR valve, which is under the turbo on the driver's side rear, back on the high pressure pump, when I close the IPR to 85% with the scan tool, there's no change in this air hose. And so that means that either the IPR has failed and it's not closing and allowing the high pressure system to build oil pressure, or that there's a leak. And so the next step, we're gonna I'm recommending that we're gonna put an IPR in this thing and then recheck it. And if I still don't have a change, then it all has to come apart. Okay, so what you gotta do, an easy thing to do here is, here's the degas bottle right here. Okay, you disconnect this hose over here and you just tuck it right there. You disconnect that hose and you tuck it here, and you put caps on here, and you can pull this bottle all the way forward and out of the way. There's a Fickum right there, this big control module there. You got to take that out. That sits on top of this valve cover with these three of these big connectors. So all I did was disconnect the 4 injectors, 1, 2, 3, and then there's one right here. All you do is you just push a pin in. And then I had to disconnect the electrical connector from the IPR, and that's here. It's got a heat wrap around it. You got to pop that off. And then here is the connector. And the connector sits like this. And you basically have to just pop the metal thing back like that, and then pop off the connector and pull it out of the way. So it's all the way back there, way under the turbo. Right there. All right, so what you gotta do is kind of tricky. You gotta come in through the backside with a wobble socket, and you gotta have an arrangement of stuff, and the problem is it's usually pretty tight. You got to have this socket, a socket that's similar to this. It will be for an IPR. I like this one, made in Taiwan. And I'll put a link in the description for this socket, but this is a Lyle, I believe. I thought this was Lyle. Anyways, here's the IPR. Electrical connector goes through here. And once you break it loose, the good thing is it usually spins pretty freely out. It's just a pain because it's all the way down there. All right, let's get it out. I'll show you what it looks like. All right, so here we go. IPR is out now. So the main thing you want to look for in the screen of the IPR, you want to make sure you don't see any metal. Any metal at all whatsoever. And the whole system's got to come apart. So this one doesn't have any holes in the screen. So this is what it looks like. You come down the socket, see how the connector is in the socket here? So how I did it was my socket is 3/8 drive. So I used a 3/8 wobble universal, and then a 3/8 to 1/2 inch adapter, and then about a 4 or 5 inch, 1/2 inch extension. And then I had to use a 1/2 inch ratchet to get it out. So that's where it goes. That's what it looks like. And it goes in that hole right down there. That is the high pressure pump. So we're gonna put this IPR in, and we're gonna recheck the air leak. If it still leaks, everything's got to come apart. All right. All right, here we are. Got the charger on there. Let's go again. $297 so far. Even after you do a high pressure oil system repair, it takes this long just to get it started, just to get all the air purged out. And then you actually have to run it. You have to run it for a while. You have to drive it a few times, and even the next 2 or 3 starting, you can have a little bit of a longer crank until it's completely bled. All right, here we go. $299. I think the highest we got earlier was $359. I don't think the battery is going to let us get that far. All right, here we go. We got a booster on the other battery. All right, let's go. Is that machine on? All right, here we go. We're going to go for this one more try. Okay, so moving forward on testing this thing for the high pressure oil leak, what we're going to do is we're going to take off the valve covers. We're going to do the valve covers first, and then we're gonna air check this thing again to see if we can find the leak without tearing apart the high pressure pump cover. So basically we're gonna take all that off. We're gonna get these valve covers off. Let's get it. All right, so here's a little tip on the driver's side. Disconnect this hose from the coolant bottle, disconnect this hose from the coolant bottle. Get a cap that fits on there pretty good. Put them on both. Leave the degas bottle cap on, and you can move this cap. And look at that. Look at all that room back there that you have on this thing to get all the way in the back. There you go. Little tip for the driver's side. Make it easy. Boom, there's the oil rail right there. All right, one more side to go. Let's get it. Okay, so little tech tips for this side over here for taking this valve cover off. Basically what you have is you're gonna have a bracket like this that sits at the back of the cylinder head on top of the valve cover. You're gonna undo that. You're gonna have this guy here, and this is in the middle of the valve cover. There's a nut right there where the back pressure sensor goes onto. You're gonna take that nut off, and these 4 nuts right there, okay? Well, first you're gonna take off the Fickum. The Fickum's here. You got 3 connectors. You're gonna take that off. You're gonna take these 3 brackets off, and then you're gonna take the valve cover out. Now the passenger side's a little bit different. A lot more stuff in the way. So you're gonna take this cac tube out right here, okay? Disconnect the end at the intercooler. Don't touch the hose on the pipe. Same thing on this end, okay? And the whole thing comes out like this. I usually leave this bottom clamp on the intercooler. Next thing you're gonna have is this guy here, the alternator bracket. This is to cool the alternator, and it just has these clips. So I start at the bottom and I insert a hook tool, and I pop up one and I just lift up, and then I go to the next one and I lift it up more, and then I come over here, lift that one, then that one, and then, you know, go all the way down. Next thing I do is I take off the filler tube just to make it easy. And take the ICP sensor out. You're gonna take the glow plug module out. It has 2 connectors, 2 nuts. You're gonna take those off. Those go on the bracket like that. You're gonna take this bracket out. Okay? You're gonna take all that out. You're gonna have to pop the harnesses out of the way. You're gonna have here the transmission dipstick tube. You're gonna have to come around from the back side of the dipstick tube and get the nut off. Take this valve cover bolt out first so you don't tear up your arm trying to get to everything, because it's a stud. Okay, so this is what it looks like. You got the harness here. Just pull this harness. Normally it sits way down here. Just pull it up here to get it out of the way. Then all your harnesses are up, okay? You gotta unclip everything. And then from there, the tricky part is the back 2 bottom bolts. What I usually do is I'll take a little gear wrench right here, little 12mm gear wrench that's got a flex head in it, okay? And you're gonna reach under here, under the evap core, okay? And you're gonna unthread it, and you're gonna take out the back 2 bolts, the bottom 2, and then take out the back one over there at the rear of the valve cover, and then just take all the ones across the top, and then they're all gonna come out. So they're all really easy to get out, except for the bottom 2 and the back one. Once you get those out, the rest is gravy, and we'll continue with that. Let me get these out. Okay, so we're air checking this thing. All right, so there we are. Got this thing at almost 120 PSI. We're right there in the oil rail. So we've got both valve covers off. With that one off over there, I couldn't really hear anything. You should be able to hear that. Hear what that sounds like. That is air pushing out. So the fact that you can hear it on this side and not the other side tells me that most likely we have this standpipe here is probably bad, that Allen right there. So we're gonna take that out and inspect it. And there's a dummy plug there. So we're gonna inspect that and see what we find. But that's what it sounds like. All right, let's check it out. Okay, so here we go. So we got this thing apart now. And so this is the standpipe right here. So I will show you a diagram about how all this works. The other half of the standpipe is still in the block. I have to take off the oil rail to get that, and I'll show you as we go. But so this section here, there's an O-ring that's supposed to see that O-ring is torn. It's supposed to be an O-ring there, and the updated kind, they have an O-ring, and then that white right there, that white center, that's a Teflon washer. So that's supposed to be there to keep the O-ring from blowing out. And there should be one there as well, and that one's gone. So we're gonna recommend these standpipes, and we'll have to take the oil rails off to do it. And then what we'll do is we'll put the new standpipes and dummy plugs back in, and we'll air check it again to see if we still have a leak. All right, I'll show you a diagram about how all this works so you understand it better. But that's the culprit right there. I would imagine that we put new standpipes and dummy plugs in this thing, and it's going to be fixed and it's going to run. And then from there, hopefully we don't have any other issues. All right. Okay, so to get the rest of this standpipe out, you got to take this oil rail off right here. There's a special tool to pull the rest of it out. But I'm going to pull this oil rail out because I want to double check this injector to make sure it's this torqued properly. But we're also going to take out that dummy plug right there, and I'll show you what that looks like. There's 9 bolts around the perimeter of the oil rail, and it is a T27. So this is the easy side to do. The other side's kind of a pain because you got the HVAC box in the way. This side's pretty simple. Actually, it's really simple. And then a little tip is you grab the valve cover and bring it over here, and you set the oil rail on the valve cover, and it doesn't drip oil everywhere. So let me get that off. Okay, so we got the oil rail off. So this is the underside of the oil rail. All right, so these are called nipple cups, and these 4, they go in the top of the injectors. Okay, so there's a seal on the top of the injectors that you don't replace. It's in the injector. They say you can replace it, but trust me, I've tried. You can't get it off. All right, so this rail normally is flipped upside down. So this one here is where the dummy plug goes. And they call it a dummy plug because this rail can be used either way. You see, it's the same. It's just plugged off in different places for different things. So this plug here, this goes on the front hole, okay? So it'll go upside down like this with an Allen, all right? Now you can see we have this Teflon washer and then an O-ring, and then an O-ring, and a Teflon washer, and that's to keep the oil from pushing past the O-ring. The Teflon washer keeps it there. It's a Teflon seal. Then you have the standpipe. This is the bottom of the standpipe. So this goes down into the block like this, at an angle like that. And then it has the top of the plug, which is here, and this goes in here. Now this one here, this one wouldn't run. You can see the pieces of O-ring inside that hole. When I come to this side, you can see the O-ring pieces in there. So I'm gonna clean out all those O-ring pieces. The important part of taking this off is so you can clean that. So I'm gonna take that off, I'm gonna clean it, and we're gonna put this oil rail back on, and we're gonna put a new dummy plug here, and a new standpipe assembly on this side, and then we're gonna double check it and make sure there's no leaks. Provided there's no leaks, we're going to replace the dummy plug and the standpipe on the other side because, well, you should do all of them at the same time because they're common failure items. And if you don't do the other side, it's going to fail, and then you're going to be taking it back apart again. So let's get that done. I'll show you what it looks like once I get that on. Okay, so this whole system starts in the back of the valley, and it starts underneath this cover. I just wanted to show you what this cover looks like first. This cover here, right here, is a hole, and that is where the IPR valve goes. that IPR valve is an injection pressure regulator. That regulates the oil pressure. Okay, so that regulates the oil pressure that the engine, that the oil pump is producing, and what goes out to the engine. So now let's look at okay, so now this is the lifeblood of the Powerstroke engine. This is called the high pressure oil pump. All right, so this is a gear that is driven off the back of the engine. Okay, it's behind a big cover on the back of the engine, and this thing pumps oil. All right, it has oil that supplied to it from down here, and it makes oil, and it produces oil, and it produces oil, and it is all regulated, like I said, by this guy, the injection pressure regulator. All right, so this is normally on the outside of the cover. They're not showing you the cover. This is showing you the pump with no cover. So it all starts here. The pump pumps oil, and the oil comes out of the pump. And the oil comes out of the pump through a fitting, and then it is pumped around by this guy. All right, so the oil goes in here. It's called a branch tube. The oil is pumped into this branch tube, and this branch tube goes around the back of the engine and through the block, okay, on both sides of the engine, and it has a hole that sticks right there. All right, so now these also, another problem is you can have a cracked branch tube, although I've never seen that. You can have that. That is a possibility. So from here, you have this down in the block. Oil is up here, pumping into this tube and all the way around. Now this is a sealed system, sealed by O-rings, and is not supposed to have any leaks whatsoever. Otherwise, you will have a problem. So the oil comes around here, and then from there, let's talk about what comes next. Let's see, I thought I had a picture of this. Maybe I do not. Okay, so then the oil is pumped up from the branch tube down here, and that's where this O-ring goes, from the branch tube up this, what's called a standpipe, and this is a two-piece component. All right, now this one is bad. This one's blown out, and in this video I will show you about this and also how we test for this. So this goes inside of here, okay, and the oil comes up and it disperses out of these holes into this guy right here. This is called the oil rail. This is the underside of the oil rail. So this is where the nipple cups, these are called nipple cups, and this is where the oil comes out. So the oil comes up through into this one. This is at the back of the engine. There's two holes, back and the front. The back one, the standpipe, disperses oil in here, disperses out throughout this rail. This is plugged off because this can be put on either way. Disperses the oil through this rail and out of these nipple cups. And these nipple cups go into the top of the injectors. And that pushes the oil down on top of the fuel, and that is how it makes high pressure fuel, controlled by high pressure oil. All right, so here we go. So I'm doing the other side because all the injectors were loose. So one little tip about these 6 liters is you got to make sure that these things are torqued properly, because there's a copper washer on the end of here. All right, and if you don't torque this injector down properly, then what will happen is you will have fuel that will leak down the injector and into the combustion chamber, and I have actually seen it hydrolock the engine where it won't even crank because there's so much fuel. The other thing that happens is it blows combustion gas back up. So make sure that you torque these injectors properly. You can actually see this one here. This one actually has black on the O-ring. This is a white O-ring. And this shows you right here the problem. So it should look like that. So here's one here. Look at all the crap that's on there. That should not be like that. So make sure you look these up. So basically there's 2 torque specs. There's an old style and a new style, and the old style, I believe, is a 40 Torx, a T40, and it's like 24 foot-pounds. Don't torque anything based on what I'm telling you. I'm guessing. I'm not looking at my computer screen. And this is a T45. This is, I believe, the new style, and this is 26 foot-pounds. So you got to make sure that you torque these properly. Otherwise, you're going to be in a world of hurt. So I've got new reseal kits. Basically, what you're going to do is you're going to reseal this O-ring here, which is where the plug comes out of the top of the head. You're going to reseal this bottom white O-ring, and you're going to reseal this black one. They're really easy. These are really pliable. They bend really easy. But you want to make sure that every injector that you pull out, it has a copper washer on the end of here. Every single injector should have a copper washer. If it does not have one, that means it's stuck in the bottom of the bore and you need to get it out. All right? So, and what I usually use is a razor blade, and I'll put a razor blade between the injector and the copper washer to separate it. And then I pop them off. I clean the tips real good. And then I put new ones. Make sure you tap them on. I think I use like an 8mm socket, and I tap them on. If you have a good quality one, they'll stay on. So that's the little tip there. I got to do a little bit of investigating with this before I put these back in, because these have injector cups in the head, and that's what these actually seal in, is the injector cup. So let me do some investigation here, but anyways, so that's just a little tip on the injectors. Make sure you torque them. That is very important. And lubricate all the O-rings with oil. All right. Okay, so we got this all cleaned up. All right. In this one here, I double checked the injectors. They were all loose, so I actually pulled them all out, resealed them, and put them back in. But that's not what this job is about. This job is about the oil leak, the nose start, and the standpipe and dummy plugs. So on the driver's side, you put the oil rail back in. All right, so you put the oil rail in, and this side you can put the whole standpipe in with the oil rail. The other side, you have to put the bottom of the standpipe in before you put the oil rail on, because of the HVAC box. It won't clear. So in this one here, all we're gonna do is we've opened these up. Now you can see how this one has a Teflon washer on the bottom, and then an O-ring, and then it has a Teflon washer here and an O-ring. Okay, the other one was missing the Teflon washer. Now this is the top side of the standpipe. This has got the O-ring up here that's torn. I mean, that was torn on the other one, and this has got the Teflon washer, the O-ring, and a bottom O-ring where it seals in the pipe. So here's our bottom of our standpipe. All right. So in this one here, we can actually connect this, and all you use is engine oil. So since I'm doing this here with the camera, it's kind of hard, but basically all you're going to do is going to apply some clean engine oil to all this, all the O-rings. Okay, so we've got all that done. All right, we're just going to wipe it all down. This one here, okay, so we're going to push that together. It comes together in the tube, and then you actually pull it apart because you have to have it in two pieces. So now that oil rail right there, torque that oil rail. It's very, very important that you torque it. So just to give you an idea, I put the oil rail on, and I put it on kind of just snug, and then I came back with a torque wrench, and it was actually, I had to turn my torque wrench about 90 degrees before it was torqued. So you just want to make sure. So now what we're going to do is we're going to put these in, new standpipe and dummy plug on this one side, and we're just going to verify that we don't have a leak anymore, and then I'm going to do the other side, and I'll show you that as we go. But this one here, so I'm gonna run these in, torque them down, and then we're gonna recheck this. Now these are 60 foot-pounds. The oil rail bolts, these little T27s, these are only 10 foot-pounds, so 120 inch-pounds. But these are 60 foot-pounds, both. All right, make sure you torque these. It's very, very important that you torque them. All right, let me get this torqued on, hook up the adapter, and we'll see if we still have a leak. Okay, so we got the test equipment on here. All right, and so this one still has a slight leak. It's got a little bit of a leak over here at the number 1 or number 2, where the injector goes, where the cup and the injector seal together. In this case here, I'm pretty sure that they're not going to go any further with this truck, so we're just going to be putting it back together and seeing if it runs. So that's what it looks like there. I've narrowed it down to the bottom of that nipple cup that I showed you. It's leaking there. So there's a seal inside the oil reel, and there's a seal on top of the injector. It can be either one. But it's not near as loud as it was yesterday. Yesterday it was really loud. And there's this weird cricking and popping noise. So, anyways, we're going to call this one good. We're going to replace the other side, and we're going to see. So that's how you check it. Let's get the other side apart. Okay, so this side here, a little more tricky because of the air box. Okay, so there's 2 screws down at the bottom that are real hard to get to. All right, so here's what I found is a good little trick. I found this set at O'Reilly or whatever. It's a set of Titans. All right, so they're tamper-proof Torx, and they're like a pretty, they're not a bad length. They're actually a pretty good length. So what I found was this with something similar to this that has a locking flex to it, and where the bit will lock in. This has been what I found to be the best, that works the best. So that's my recommendation. I will try to find something. This is a Mac Tools, so I will try to find something comparable and put a link in the description. But anyways, so this is what I recommend. That's how you do it. And let me get this off, and I'll show you what we find. Okay, so one more tip when you're doing this, the passenger side, do not forget to separate the standpipe. The new standpipe will come together. Do not forget to separate it and take this part and put it in before you put the oil rail on. See, no oil rail right now. See? So what we're gonna do is we're gonna put the standpipe in its hole right there. Okay, and you're not gonna be able to really push it down. It's just gonna kind of be in the hole, and the oil rail is gonna go on top of it. And then whenever you screw the top part in, it's gonna push down into the bottom part, and it's gonna seat itself. Just make sure you lube it up real good. Do not forget, before you put that oil rail on, stick that tube in there. Okay, here we go. Truck's all back together. Now I want to show you guys what it looks like. Okay, so we don't care about any of the other PIDs. We only care about that ICP. And remember, we bled the whole high pressure oil system, so there's no oil in it. All right, so it's going to take a bit of cranking. Remember, 10 seconds on the starter. Let's go. Hopefully the batteries hang on long enough to get this thing started. Make sure your batteries are fully charged when you're doing this. Otherwise, well, hopefully we don't have this problem. So we've built 0 PSI. Before it wouldn't go over 350. All right, here we go. So don't forget, when you get done doing a job like this, anytime you disable this high pressure oil system, you're going to have to crank it a lot. It's going to take a while to get all the oil. And then after that, you're going to have to run it for a while. And the couple times that you turn it off, you're going to have a longer crank. Just don't get discouraged when doing this and thinking that you have a problem. It's a process to get this thing running. Here we go. All right, so we are running right now. Now, you can't look at any of these PIDs right now. So the injection pressure regulators have 42%, 41%. It's going to move all over the place. Injection pressure is 1,100. So right there, what you want to look at is that. So when it's running, you want to look at the desired and the pressure. When you're cranking it, you only want to look at the pressure. It needs 500 to start. When this thing hit like 380, the ICP sensor was a little behind because we fired at 380. Before, we got to 359 and it wouldn't fire. So you got to remember, this ICP sensor is a little bit behind. So there we go. So now I'm going to have to run this thing for a while, and I'm going to have to drive it, and I'm going to have to run it. And it's gonna take some time, and the first few times I could get a long crank. And also, when you get done with this, you want to make sure you go back and clear the codes, because you could have a code for low cranking pressure. So and also, it may run a little rough while it bleeds out this oil. Remember, the oil is what pushes on the fuel. So if you don't have oil pressure, you won't have fuel pressure. So there we go. We got this thing running. It's looking good. Thanks for checking out Nuts and Bolts with Tone. I hope you enjoyed this video. I hope you found it informative. I tried my best to teach you about how the 6-liter works, how to look at it, how to diagnose it, and one of the most important PIDs, which is the injection control pressure. So use this. If you have any questions, message me, send a comment, whatever you want to do. Just let me know if you have any trouble, any issues, any questions. Check out my Instagram at Nuts and Bolts with Tone for my daily life as a mechanic. And hit the like button, hit the subscribe button, and hit that bell. You get notified of all my future content. Thank you for watching. See you next time.